So I heard you like drawing cards. I like drawing cards too. I want to show you a legacy deck that can draw a lot of cards. And it's not blue. This is Legacy Enchantress. This is the NAYA Enchantress build, the red, white, green build. And the basic premise of an Enchantress deck is to play an Enchantress effect that lets you draw a card every time you play an enchantment. Even if the enchantment gets countered, you still get to draw the card, so you can generate a large amount of card advantage just by playing enchantments, even if they're countered. And what we're going to do is we're going to dissect the deck a little and show you what makes it work, what slots are flexible, what the win conditions are, and how you basically play the deck and keep yourself alive until you can win. So we'll start with the Enchantress effects. We have 4 Agrothian Enchantresses. 2 mana, 0/1, cannot be the target of spells or abilities. This is what makes Enchantress tick. You cannot Abrupt Decay it, you cannot Lightning Bolt it, Sword to Plowshare it, you cannot target this. The only way it's going to die is when your opponent wastes a mass removal spell. This, for some people, it's controversial. Other players, it's automatic in there. I run Green Sun Zenith. This is basically Agrothian Enchantress 5 through 8. I can tutor it up, shuffle Green Sun Zenith back in the library. It's also handy if you know your opponent is playing Spell Snare and not Spell Pierce. Spell Snare can counter Agrothian Enchantress, but not Green Sun Zenith for 3, or for when you cast it to get the Agrothian Enchantress, because the converted mana cost is now 3 when it's on the stack. If your opponent is playing Spell Pierce, you go with the Agrothian Enchantress instead, hard casting it. Green Sun Zenith is also a great way to bait out counter spells if you know your opponent's playing them, so you can kind of clear the path to land either your Agrothian Enchantress or your other 4 Enchantress effects, Enchantress's Presence, the enchantment that says when you play an enchantment, draw a card. And I remember playing this back during Onslaught, Odyssey Block, and 7th edition with the Verduran Enchantress, Enchantress's Presence, Wild Growth, Words of Wind. You just play the enchantment, bounce the permanent, just keep cycling that over and over until you bounce all your opponent's stuff. It's 3 mana, it's an enchantment. There's really, Legacy, there's not really much enchantment hate. Yes, we have cards like Abrupt Decay. You can use Vindicate for it. There's those random, just like 1 or 2 of cards that just destroy enchantments. But there's not really much enchantment hate, at least mass enchantment hate in Legacy. It's mostly mass removal based, Ratchet Bomb, Engineered Explosives, things of that nature. And they can only hit certain converted mana costs. The days of playing Neveneral's Disc are kind of over with the new mass removal we have. Now, these can come down as early as, all of these can come down as early as turn 2. And this is why they can. Your 4 Utopia Sprawls and your 4 Wild Growths. These are your mana accelerants. A pet peeve I have when I see a lot of people with Enchantress, and I don't know why they do it. No, I never really hear why they do it. People keep saying Abundant Growth is mana acceleration. It's not. You read the card, all it does is it turns your land into a Bird of Paradise. You can tap it for any color mana, which is good. You're running a 3-color deck, or if you play 2-color variants, a 2-color deck. It comes into play, cantrips, and draws you a card. It does not accelerate your mana, though. You still have the same amount when you're done. These 4 cards give you that acceleration. Utopia Sprawl can only hit a forest. But when it comes into play, you name your color, tap whatever mana you need, and get that color. Wild Growth can enchant any land and just gives you the green mana. Normally what I like to do is put Utopia Sprawl on my forest, call for white mana, save 1 or 2 for red, and enchant my plains with Wild Growth so I have the ability to get a green and white whenever I need to at a time. Now to keep you alive, we come with our propaganda effects and basically our prison lock. It's sort of a... This deck is basically a combo deck and a prison deck, kind of all together. We have our Elephant Grass. Non-black creatures cannot attack. Cumulative upkeep of 1. Okay, your upkeep first time, you pay 1. Next time, pay 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. Non-black creatures cannot attack you unless they pay 2 for each creature attacking. It's a good card very early on. Stops, very early on it sort of, it slows down creature-based assaults, affinity, goblins, very, very fast creature decks. Confinement basically just stops anything cold. They can still attack you, but you can't be the target of spells or abilities, and all damage dealt to is reduced to 0. We're not really worried about the upkeep. Discard a card, we don't care. And we're not really worried about skipping your draw phase, because this deck can draw, in some situations, 15 cards on one turn. So losing the one draw you would have, we really don't care. Some people run Moat, which is $200, and Moat is a great card. 4 mana, non-flying creatures cannot attack you. That's great. Then they printed Delver, then they printed Emrakul. I mean, there's a lot of creatures out there nowadays that are going to come into play, and they fly. Moat is a good card. It's iconic. It's from Legends. Hasn't been reprinted. But it's lost its power. Sphere of Safety does similar things like Elephant Grass. It's a propaganda effect. But it's based on the number of enchantments you play. You have 10 enchantments in play. Every creature that attacks you, they gotta pay 10 mana. I like that over Moat because it prevents... It basically gives your opponent 2 options. They either attack you or they play something else. So it gives them an option that's most of the time not really good for them. Now, here are flexible slots I have. These are 4 cards that I run. And it's flexible. You don't need to run these. You can run whatever you want. But this is what I recommend. Oblivion Ring. You got to catch all, any non-land permanent. Great against show and tell. Boom. Oblivion Ring, whatever they bring in. Seal of Primordium. Random artifacts and enchantments that could pose a problem. Say, I don't know, your opponent has Aura of Silence in play. You know, all your artifacts and enchantments are going to cost 2 more to play. We don't have artifacts, but we have 30 enchantments. So, getting this out, tutoring for it and getting it out can make your deck a lot faster because you're not being taxed on your mana. Other random cards that could hate out, say you see your opponent dropped a Ratchet Bomb. You might want to take care of it either with the Oblivion Ring or the Seal. Random things that these things can get. Ground Seal, I have it in there. It's anti-graveyard tech for game 1. It's tutorable. It stops life from the Loam shenanigans, Reanimator, Dread Return, style decks. It cantrips when it comes into play. It's good. I like it as a one-of. It goes great with the graveyard hate I got in the sideboard as well. And then of course we have Lignify. Random creatures you don't want, that basically just creatures that have annoying abilities. Or, once again, like show and tell matchups, just pop it on an Emrakul, pop it on a Grizzlebrand, things like that. It's very, very good. You know, these are the catch-all, you know, 4 flexible cards, and this is what I chose to run. Now, for some more protection, especially against blue decks, you have City of Solitude. It's real simple. This can, you know, with your mana acceleration, it can come down on turn 2. Basically, you know, you play this, it lands, it's on the, it's in play. Your opponent can't counter your stuff now. So, you know, you can cast whatever you want with impunity at that point in time. And then we have Sterling Grove. This is protection from enchantment destruction as well as a tutor, all built into one. Normally, I like to keep one in play just to have that protection where if your opponent wants to get rid of something, they gotta kill the Sterling Grove first. Then they can go ahead and target whatever they want to actually get rid of. So it basically, this is saying it's like a 2-for-1. You got to get rid of 2 cards to get the one you really want. And then we come to our win conditions. Sigil of the Empty Throne. You get your 4/4 angel tokens every time you play an enchantment. This is actually, I've actually, like, you know, play tested and goldfished it. You can generate a very, very large amount of tokens, like, you know, 5 to 10 tokens on some turns, and then just pass the turn and say go, and the next turn it's game. Same with Words of War. You have enough Enchantress effects in play. You know, you play 1 enchantment and you're going to draw, you know, 6 cards. Well, you just tap 6, you know, tap for 6 mana, and you can deal 12 damage. You know, Sigil and Words of War, when they hit play, the game should end relatively quickly. Now, these are the primary win conditions that an Enchantress deck has normally ran. I also prefer to run Emrakul. Reason why I prefer to run Emrakul: 1, I play counter magic in some of my decks. I'm a control player at heart. And when you deconstruct the Enchantress deck, a control player should know right off the bat, you're not going to win the Enchantress war. You're not going to be able to counter every enchantment spell there is. So you stick to the ones you need to counter. You stick to the Solitary Confinement, the Sphere of Safety, or Moat. You stick to the City of Solitude. You counter those. And you counter the win conditions. You counter Sigil and you counter Words of War. Those are all you need to do. Don't bother with the Enchantresses or the Enchantress's Presence. Don't bother with the Mana Accelerant. Don't bother with any of that. Worry about their protection and worry about their win conditions, and an Enchantress deck will eventually deck itself. Because they're not going to have any, they're not going to be able to win. Emrakul is here for 2 reasons. 1, if I am decking myself, I can pitch it to the graveyard and just shuffle everything back together. 2, I actually want to have it in play. It's uncounterable, it's a 15/15, it's a time walk, and it has Annihilator 6. When this lands, chances are the game is going to be over in about 2 turns. I'm going to take 6 permanents my opponent has. If my opponent does have a blocker, it's more than likely going to die. I'm going to get an extra turn out of it, which means I'm going to be drawing more cards probably. And I'm basically just going to win. It's uncounterable, and it's inevitable if you can survive long enough and you cast it. That's basically game. Because it gives you the extra turn, and that could be all you need. The same situation with Solitary Confinement. Sometimes you just drop a confinement to give you that time walk against an aggro deck. Sometimes that's all you need. You need to gauge everything properly. What position do you have on the board? What's your opponent have? What's in your hand? Do you have a Sterling Grove or 2 in play where you can tutor something up? Maybe you can drop a confinement, time walk for a turn, and then go next turn and try to do something else. Okay, you need to figure out what you're going to do before you actually drop the confinement. Now, for your mana base, and I run a cheap mana base, I don't see the point to having the fetch lands. I've never really been mana screwed. But I run my 10 forests. I got my 4 plains. and I got my 2 Sarah's Sanctums. I would prefer to run 3. I'd prefer to actually take out a Plains and run a 3rd Sanctum, simply because the way the Legend rule is now, I can have a Sanctum in play, 8 enchantments on the board, tap out for 8 mana, play the other Sanctum, put the one that's been tapped into the yard, tap for 8 more mana, fire off an Emrakul, and you can do that, and you can actually do that relatively quickly. We're talking turn 5 even. You can do that quickly. And then we got our Horizon Canopies, which I love Horizon Canopies. I got 4 copies of these things, 2 in my Death and Taxes and 2 in this. I love it. It's a green-white mana source that takes 1 life a turn if you need to use it every turn. But it can cantrip. I mean, you can tutor with the Sterling Grove and just crack the canopy to draw the card. I mean, I like it. It's amazing. I love it. And then we run the expensive lands, where we got our 2 Savannas and our 1 Taiga. If you're looking to just run a green-white variant, like I run, just take out the Taiga, add another Savanna, take out the Words of War, and Words of Wilding from Onslaught, the green version of the Words cycle, which just puts a 2/2 token into play. You have to pass a turn, but still, I mean, you can generate enough tokens with Sigil or Words of Wilding in a green-white build. You could probably win relatively quickly with that. And that would be, if you want to just make it green-white and save yourself the trouble of tapping Utopia Sprawl for red. Now, for the sideboard, I got 1 Enlightened Tutor. The reason I have 1 Tutor is because I only have 3 Ley Lines of Sanctity. You should run 4. I got 3, so that's one of the problems with this deck that I have here. Is I need another Ley Line, but I can pick those up relatively easily. So we got the 1 Tutor. We got 1 Seal of Cleansing. The reason why I'm running a Seal of Cleansing and 1 of the Seal of Primordium is, I just like to have the variations. You hate it when your opponent drops a Pithing Needle, or what could they drop? Pithing Needle. You could drop a Revoker. You could drop you could drop Meddling Mage and name something with it. So that's why I run 1 of each, just to have that variation, to where they have to kind of burn 2 cards to get rid of both. Another Ground Seal for our graveyard-based decks that we face. 2 Rest in Peace for graveyard-based decks we face. We have Gaddock Teague. Now, this is another reason why I run Green Sun Zenith, simply because I can tutor it up. Tutor it up against Ad Nauseam Tendrils, tutor it up against Goblin Charbelcher. You take out their win conditions. Many decks, combo decks, you tutor this up. It's not an auto-win against every deck, but it makes it harder for them to win, which is why you want it there. Slows them down to the point where you can get your stuff up and running and just, roll over them with an Emrakul. Another Confinement, in case you need another card for your lock. Another City of Solitude for those control matchups. Okay, we got Karmic Justice. That prevents a lot of enchantment hate shenanigans, because it basically gives you a Vindicate every time your opponent tries to nuke something, so they have to take out this before anything else. And then we got, once again, more hate for the blue players, Choke. And I love how people say, Choke kind of, takes, Choke kind of gets blue players off of certain manas. Well, or off of certain colors. Choke doesn't stop them from tapping for blue. Choke basically just stops their mana, period. And then we got Aura of Silence. Kills Affinity. Mirror Match also. Great in the Mirror Match. This deck is, it's not really that expensive. It's a good deck. It's a combo deck. It's not blue, which is pretty amazing. And, this is my Enchantress deck, Like, comment, question it, and subscribe if you like it.